Hi, and welcome to Fiction Technician. I'm Jane Kalmus. Today, we're going to be discussing my favorite kind of humor, character-based humor. And we're going to do it using a show that warms my Texan heart, King of the Hill. Okay, so what is character-based humor? I'm going to explain that by telling a little story about my brother. When Matt was about 3, he got clunked in the head with a swing and he had to go get stitches. So he's sitting there in the waiting room, he's waiting to get stitched, and the nurse is talking to him, and she's like, "Honey, are you okay? How are you feeling? Are you all right?" She's not trying to make small talk. What she's trying to do is assess whether he can respond coherently and whether he might be at risk of a concussion. And Matt is just sitting there, stone-faced. And so she's getting a little worried. She's like, "Honey, are you okay? Can you talk to me? Are you all right?" And finally Matt looks at her and he says, "Just leave me alone." All right, so you probably found that story modestly amusing at best. But it always gets a laugh from my family, and that's because we know the character involved. We know that my brother does not suffer fools. To be clear, she wasn't being foolish. He just didn't know what was going on. So your family probably does have a few stories just like this. And they get told at the holidays and everybody laughs, and it's the kind of story that people respond to with a comment like, "Classic Dad," or "That's Aunt Shirley all right." So that's character-based humor. The joke is that the character is acting like the character. Okay, so is that all there is to it? Create a character, have him act consistently like himself, and he's funny? That is actually a lot of it, but we're going to break it down a little bit more. Think back to one of those stories in your family. Chances are it's about a family member acting like himself, only a little more so. He's really leaning into whatever makes him different from other people. He's leaning into his unique perspective on the world. Well, that unique perspective is called a comic perspective. In the Comic Toolbox, John Voorhouse says, "The comic perspective is a character's unique way of looking at his world which differs in a clear and substantial way from the normal worldview." Virtually every character on King of the Hill has a strong comic perspective. We're going to start out by looking at our protagonist, Hank Hill, and his wife, Peggy. Hank's comic perspective can best be summed up as traditional Texan masculinity. He loves home maintenance.
"This grout is supposed to stay white for 20 years. What's it been, 17, 18? Peggy, where's that receipt?"
And his dog.
"Ladybird, you're a beautiful dancer."
He does not like to express emotion.
"I surely am not unfond of you, Peggy. I tell you what."
Ugh, what kind of marriage proposal is that?
Peggy's comic perspective is arrogance. She really believes she's capable of anything, from speaking Spanish
Me llamo Peggy Hill.
to winning a beauty contest
Personally, I think a little lipstick and a pair of nice earrings will win that truck.
to taking over from her minister at church.
Okay. May God look upon you with kindness and give you peace. Amen. You are now dismissed.
You'll notice that when Hank and Peggy demonstrate their comic perspective, they're doing so in an extreme, exaggerated way. Lots of guys are into home maintenance, but Hank's a little bit more so.
Which idiot made it illegal to install a working toilet in your own bathroom?
The Board of Zoning and Resources, Ordinance 621A.
The Board of Zoning and Resources did this? Huh. I love their setback requirements.
So now that we've got a character with a very strong, even exaggerated comic perspective, what do we do with them? Well, just having them express that perspective explicitly can be very funny.
Yeah, if I just jim-jangle my schedule a bit, I think I can make it to all of Bobby's practices. What a great time in a boy's father's life.
And another very funny thing to do is to put them in extreme situations that question their comic perspective and have them cling to it anyway. When Peggy is hired to do customer service for Mexican customers of Alamo Beer, she has difficulty understanding them, and you'd think that would make her question her Spanish skills. Not Peggy.
Vomiting, diarrhea, nausea. All of these calls were from Mexicans. Now, their Spanish wasn't great, but I was able to gather that they got sick after drinking Alamo.
So these sorts of brief moments of expressing or clinging to the comic perspective fit easily into any plot. In my novel, Not His Girl Friday, I have my materialistic sleuth and my bibliophile love interest looking for her uncle's lost fortune. They find a safe in his house and they think this is it. They open it up and what do they find? A bunch of journals. He's delighted, she's irritated, and the whole thing is a little bit funny. But you can also build plots or subplots around the comic perspective. Many of the episodes of King of the Hill deal with the character either leaning into or coming to question their comic perspective. Frequently they lean in and then they have to pull back and question it. A fun episode where Hank's comic perspective is called into question is called Peggy's Turtle Song. Their son Bobby overdoses on sugar one morning, and he's briefly diagnosed with ADD. Hank suggests that maybe Peggy should quit her job as a substitute teacher and stay home to provide Bobby with more attention. Peggy agrees, and this really gets Hank right in the comic perspective.
I tell you, family values are in again at the Hill House.
Hank's happy, but Peggy quickly becomes bored, and she hires a guitar teacher to try and take up some of her spare time.
Well, maybe you ought to try writing a song of your own, Peggy. I bet a woman in your situation would have a lot to say.
And what situation is that?
Well, you know, having to give up your life's work to make things easier for the rest of your family.
Yeah, I suppose a situation like that should make me want to sing. Oh, come to think of it, yesterday, the oddest little tune popped into my head. Sort of silly, but, well, you'll tell me if you think there's something to it. There once was a turtle that lived in her shell. The shell was her home and her prison as well.
Whoa, there's definitely something to that.
Really? Well, thank you. You know, I had a feeling it was very, very good.
Hank and the guitar teacher have opposing comic perspectives, so he isn't thrilled.
You know, Emily, Hank plays guitar too. He has a Guild Solid Top 1963.
Wow. So how come you're practicing on that old plywood one, Peggy?
Oh, I wouldn't think of touching Betsy.
You named your guitar Betsy?
Yep, it's one of my most precious possessions.
Interesting.
But when he finally realizes how unhappy Peggy has been, he realizes he has to do something to show her how much he loves and values her. His comic perspective has come into conflict with his love and respect for Peggy, and he has to choose Peggy.
Hi, Mom.
Bobby, honey, what are you doing here?
Well, we figured today was your special day. And since you're singing a special song, we thought you should have a special guitar to play it on.
Betsy.
All right, so this is the kind of plot that is great for series fiction. When you write a series, you don't want the character to change that much. You want the reader to be able to come back to the second, third, 10th installment in your series and still have fun running around with that same character they fell in love with back in book 1. Okay, but you also want character arcs, so how are you going to make that work? Well, having them choose between two things they value is a great way to make this work. Hank and Peggy know what they value most. They value their marriage, their family, their friends. But sometimes when they're in the grip of their comic perspective, they just can't see it. Having them choose relationships over their comic perspective is a way that King of the Hill created dozens of funny and touching plots. It's also possible to get a lot of mileage out of creating a character whose comic perspective is directly opposed to that of another character. The Hills have a son, Bobby, and his comic perspective, I think, could best be described as let it be. Hank believes that the right way to be a man is to be rugged, athletic, responsible. Bobby thinks the right way to be is just be yourself, and his self happens to be klutzy, goofy,
Where's the justice?
and maybe a little feminine.
I'm getting some nice color.
These conflicting ideas of masculinity provided endless jokes over the course of the series.
Guys can shave their legs too? That's very interesting.
Peggy!
Bobby.
Sorry, Dad.
And led to Hank's catchphrase from the early seasons, The boy ain't right. Alright, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, a thumbs up would be a great compliment. If you never want to miss a video from me, please subscribe and hit the bell icon. That will make sure you get a notification every time I upload. Okay, the last thought I want to leave you with is that a comic perspective does not need to be held by a single individual. Hank's comic perspective is shared by most of the men he spends time with, as shown in this scene where Bobby has just made the wrestling team.
You hear that, guys? Bobby made a school team today without me even being the coach.
Congratulations, Hank.
And you can even assign comic perspectives to walk-on characters, provided they belong to a group whose stereotyped comic perspective is generally understood. Here's King of the Hill showing us the comic perspective of stoners.
Ricky at the Megalomart told me to see you about growing stuff indoors.
Don't say anything.
He told me to tell you I'm cool.
He's cool.
And used car salesman.
You sold me pinstripes from my Escort.
No. Let me explain to you. I financed you pinstripes for your Escort.
And even though it's not from King of the Hill, I want to show you my favorite joke about the comic perspective shared by the population of the great state of Texas.
It's me, Pee-wee.
Where are you calling from?
Texas.
Where?
Honest. Listen, I'll prove it.
The stars at night are big and bright. Deep in the heart of Texas.
Is there ever any reason not to sing along with that song? No! That is my comic perspective. Check out, y'all.